Okay, so in this video, actually what I want to do is go through the process of O365. Actually, it's just going to be an overview of O365. I just wanted to highlight some of the differences, especially if you've been playing around with SharePoint on-prem for a while and you haven't seen O365, or you haven't seen some of the new features at the time of this video that Microsoft has been working on. I really just want to kind of highlight those just so that to drive home the warning that as a SharePoint developer, it's very important that you retool. Okay, so let's take a look. So right now, as you can see, I'm on my home screen, and this for the most part looks just like SharePoint on-prem. It actually looks pretty similar to SharePoint 2016. And it's not until I actually click into a document library to where you actually start to see some of the differences with the UI. So this is going to be the classic, the modern UI. And if, to my understanding, Microsoft built this using the new SharePoint development framework that is, at the time of this video, is in preview mode. And the way that you can take a look at this, if you look at this, for example, if we do a view source, and then just kind of take a look at the code, you can see that, oh, here it is. So if you take a look at the code, because it's rendered, it's really kind of hard to tell, what is this actually using. But you can kind of see some of the JavaScript frameworks, the JavaScript references here as far as like Knockout, React, and some of the other ones like SPO app, which is obviously a Microsoft one, and files and all this other good stuff. And there, there's the ones that was built for lists. But then as you kind of scroll through here, you see the new Office UI Fabric React, and this is just a UI framework that's brought in to kind of help with the positioning, the buttons, and all this other good stuff. And then if you take this document library and you squeeze it, you can tell that the screen starts to respond based on the size of the browser UI. So this is going to make this mobile friendly. So if you're looking at this on a tablet, for example, you're going to get a nice view of your document library compared to the out-of-the-box UI in SharePoint 2016. So that's one. And then if you look at, and it's actually pretty slick. So let me take some documents here just to kind of give you, so we have some documents to play with. So all I'm going to do is just a drag and drop, and it's going to upload. That's nothing new. I think that's been there for a while. But the response time and the reaction, as you kind of see the spinner here, as this is being processed, all of this is going to be, remote service calls to the SharePoint, either using REST API or whatever the case may be. But these are going to be remote service calls versus on the server processing. So this is uploading these documents, and each one of those documents are about 8 kilobytes in size. But the Wi-Fi that I'm connected to is not that great, so this may take a little time. While that's loading, obviously, you can come up here and you can select the document. You can open it in Excel. The other cool thing about it, I'm getting this warning because it's not fully loaded. When you in O365, and most of the SharePoint admins would know this by heart, right? Or would know this from experience, that to get OWA installed and set up properly and correctly, either with HTTPS or non-secure socket layer, to configure it for read-only mode or edit mode and all this other good stuff, sometimes can be a pain in the butt. So to have an O365 all these services properly configured and really set and hot to go is just one of those cool things that are one less thing that you have to worry about, especially as a SharePoint administrator. So now this is opening up in OWA. I have Office 2016 installed locally, so I can do that. So I think even if you go back to 2013, if you had Office 2013, I think this will work. Prior to that, I have no idea. I haven't tested, but you can edit this in the browser. The collaboration editing or co-editing feature is enabled, so I can have another person working in Excel editing this exact same document right alongside with me, and we will not get save or conflict errors or anything along those lines. What else? And that's OWA out of the box. I think that's nothing new as far as O365, other than the fact that it's configured properly and it's optimized properly for the SharePoint farm. And I think that's just one headache the SharePoint admins and architects, one less thing they have to worry about. The UI is pretty fluent. It's pretty easy to navigate, as far as like, getting to a lot of things as far as like managing views and creating views and all this other good stuff. Whereas, before in the old UI, those took several clicks. You would notice that there is no ribbon here at the top anymore. They kind of replaced that with this kind of like taskbar. And this taskbar is contextual, meaning that depending on what is selected, depends on which options are available. What else? The sharing option is pretty cool. Actually, this is another O365 ism. The sharing option. This is some organizations really like this to where they can invite people outside the organization. All you need is an email address. So if I wanted to send this to, a Yahoo email address, for example, it would say, it's outside of the organization. I think that's just going to be a warning. Now you can turn external sharing. I don't know if external sharing is turned on for this site collection, but you can enable external sharing for the site collection as a whole, or you can do it at the tenant level. And the tenant level is where is almost like the major breaker box where you can turn this on or off. So I just shared that document externally. They will have to click on the link because that person, and that was a fake email address, by the way, but because that person does not have access to this tenant, they're going to get the link, they're going to click on it, but it's going to say you don't have access, so it's going to stop them there, even yeah, so they don't have access to this tenant. I think, is that how that works? Yeah, no, maybe, I don't know. No, actually, yeah, they have to create a Microsoft login account, so they probably will be able to get that. So anyway, but once that person accepts, if they do accept, they will. It should pop up here and show me that I am sharing that document externally. Now, as far as syncing, this is an odd one. I'm not 100% on sync. I know I use the OneDrive sync client for my OneDrive, aka MySpace. But as far as the sync client here, as far as like syncing this to a library locally, I haven't had a chance to play around with that piece there. But I see that sync time and time again. You kind of see this icon throughout, and it seems like it's replacing the View and Window Explorer view, or the Window Explorer view option, where it brings it up as a file system location or UI, and then you're able to copy and paste that locally. So it seems like those are being replaced. They're still there. You just have to do some clicking in order to get around it. What else? You can view history, and this is actually pretty cool. I mean, you can obviously you can view history in prior versions of SharePoint, but I think it's easier it is to get to these different options. Just single click, and then kind of you can share, you can break inheritance for this document, or all this other good stuff. Here's another one that I found very interesting. This get link. So you can do an edit link. You can do a view link for this particular document. I can do a view link that does not require sign in, and then you can create that link. They also have an option to where you can do a set expiration date, right? So for this link, if because I'm not requiring to log in, I want to share this out. Now this is very interesting how it works. So I'm not going to require a login. I can share this out. I can set expiration for 30 days from today's date. On day 31, this link will stop working. It will have, you do not have access to it. So I think that's a very cool option, because I think was freaking most of the corporations, like corporate security, info security, and all this other good stuff, is that you have the ability to share externally with members who are not part of the organization, and I think it's good to be able to, one, understand what content is actually being shared, and two, understand who that content is being shared with. And I think because external sharing, in my mind, it really depends on what it is. I mean, this is one of those features that you really have to be careful of. But in my mind, that this should be a default to me. I think 30 days should be the default expiration for any link that's shared externally, especially if you're not requiring them to log in, and then just have that overridden at the at the individual case level. Now, that's document libraries. The other UI that Microsoft has releases with the site contents. And here you can see right here with this new site contents modern page, it gives me a few stats or site usage for this particular site. It still has the list and libraries listed here within this particular site. And then it has all the subsites that's living under this particular site. And then actually a description, which is very helpful. Views, it counts the number of views that a site is getting. And I think that's what's there in the view column. And also you have this trending content. I guess what, based on what's popular within the site. I'm not sure if this is going to be for this particular site or if this would be trending content as a summation of all the children underneath that site. The other one I want to show you, and you see this new option here. By default, it's going to create a custom list. And then, the default document library that's based on the document library template. And then you can go create an app. And this is going to give you all the other library and list types that you're kind of accustomed to. And then you can kind of see that we kind of flip back to that, what they call it, the classic view. We kind of flip back to that classic view. And I noticed that, I kind of see that, throughout the process, really depending on what you're clicking on and what you are, what feature you're trying to do. You can also create a subsite here. So let's go ahead and create a list. As you can see, I did not get an option to select which type of list. By default, this is going to be your custom list, right? And I give it a description, right? And then you have the show and navigation option, which is very helpful. So once this gets created, it's going to pop up here in my left nav. And then, and this is the third one. So as of today, this is the third UI, modern UI that Microsoft is using and rolling out into O365. Again, these are going to be options that are not available as of yet at the time of this video with SharePoint 2016, which was just released a couple months ago. So again, O365 is going to be full featured. It's going to be more advanced to the on-prem, and then that's Microsoft's model, right? They're always pumping up more features and more functionality to O365, and then kind of retrofitting on-prem once the time permits, as they kind of develop those. But I think that's a strategic move on Microsoft's side, right? I think they are really trying to really promote, O365, migrate to the cloud. You never have to upgrade SharePoint again. It just kind of, again, it's a top-down decision. And if I was a CIO and CEO, it's a no-brainer for me, right? Obviously, you're going to be in those industries, and we kind of talked about this in a prior video, where security is going to be a concern, document type regulation through like finances or healthcare and all this other good stuff. How documents should be encrypted, and I'm sure they're closing those gaps if they are not already closed. Here's another cool feature for the new modern UI list. You have these flow apps, and flow is more so like a simple workflow. And here you can send email. I haven't had a chance to really dive into this, so I'm not going to actually go too much detail. But actually, the flow is more of a workflow type solution. Once this action, do this. Once this action, you can put in the process to do X. And then you have Power Apps, which is like another application used to create, I guess they call them Power Apps. I'm not 100% on how this would be used. These Power Apps, once they're created, they have more of a mobile feel to them. So I'm not sure if they were meant to be only used for mobile apps and tablets and such. So, or if, you can use these to create a form. And then, if a user wants to fill out a form, and then obviously the SharePoint list in the background would be the data source or the data collector of any item used in that form. So that's what we normally would use, like Nintex for, Nintex forms for, to really kind of put this flashy or a nice UI, user-friendly UI in front of the form instead of using the default forms library on the list, and then have them complete that form and have all that data captured in the list itself. So this is going through the process. I'm actually get out of here and let's continue on with our quick 10-cent tour of O365. Now, And here you can notice that this is, so of course you have the gear icon that helps you navigate in context, right? Uh, as far as like, um, within the site or within the library, as far as like, creating apps or adding apps, and navigating out to the app store and all this other good stuff. So the gear icon still remains true. And I think its functionality is very similar to that on-prem. But this waffle, right? I think this is where things really start to change the game a bit. And I think this waffle is really, O365, and I kind of mentioned this before, is really comprised of many different applications or many different components, right? And SharePoint is just one of those. You have OneDrive, this still feels like a component, i.e., or a platform or application, right? But we know that, in its core, this is nothing but a SharePoint site collection with a document library. So this is a document library. This is, for me, it's personalized. It's really meant to replace your My Documents on your folder in a cloud sense. And obviously, if you log into any other device with your same credentials, these documents should be available, and you can have these synced, to your tablet or to your laptop for offline processing. Like if you're going to jump on a flight and you need to review some documents or work on the PowerPoint doc, OneDrive is going to be your sync. Very similar to Google Drive, Dropbox, and all those other ones. So I think from an Office or Microsoft ecosystem, this fits nice in that regard. Groups, this is actually today, and we're going to stumble across this. I never opened this up, but as of today, Microsoft has released the new modern UI for groups. And before groups, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. Choose a name, test group. Before, these groups looked very similar to team sites, and there was a lot of confusion on when would I use a group, when would I use a team site, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, let's call it 1, 2, 3. Let's make it unique. Still checking. What? Okay. Not available. But you know what? This is not a Microsoft. I think this is a Deshaun thing. I just flipped my subscription over to the higher grade subscription because I wanted to check out group. Just as of today, Microsoft released the new UI and the new group to team site integration. So once this feature gets rolled out, what's going to happen is that when you went to create a group, prior to this feature, you got a email distribution list, you got a Yammer feed or a SharePoint feed for collaboration. So it was really meant to, hey, let's put this committee together. Let's talk about, this committee. We're going to store our documents in these groups. That's usually when you fire up an O365 group. Now, they use the word groups, and some folks confuse this with SharePoint security groups, and that's not what this is. So these are really collaboration. They're meant for groups. Kind of reminds me of a Facebook group, to where people are coming together as a community or as a small team to tackle a common purpose or use. Now these are very useful in a sense that, especially when you're in O365, because say, for example, if I want to collaborate with Microsoft support, right, and I have all these documents, all these logs, and those what I would do normally is sort of emailing that stuff, and they send you like a Dropbox or a drive to handle large files and code files and all this other good stuff. You know how we have to double zip ASPX files and CS files and all this other good stuff. You just put together a group, right? And then you give them external access, and then they get invited to the group. You do all these news feed. They may leave you a message on the news feed that say, hey, can you grab these ULS logs and dump them here? And this is where everything will reside, everything will collab. And I think that's a better sense of the use versus trying to figure out, okay, I need to create this team site. Which site collection should I put this in? And, worrying about the structure, the right security, breaking inheritance, and all this other good stuff. O365 groups really were meant for that. Okay, yeah, I'm part of the web steering committee. Let's fire up. Well, I think that's more of a team site scenario because it's more longevity. But, we want to do a Christmas party, right, or a holiday party. So let's put this, these 5 people together and get the menu together and, interact and all this other good stuff. Book a venue. Those were the O365 great scenarios for O365 groups. As of today, in the first release tenant, and I'll show you this. All right, let's get out of here. As of today, in the first release tenant, Microsoft just released a merger of O365 groups and team sites, and they did not use the legacy team sites. They used the new modern team sites, which you're going to get that new slick UI that I just showed you with document libraries and lists and site content pages and all this other good stuff. So let's do this. Let's go into the admin panel, and we're coming up on 20 minutes. I'm going to try to cut this short. I actually have another meeting appointment I have to run to. So let's go ahead and leave this page. We're abandoning our group creation. And again, I don't think that's a Microsoft thing. I think that's just me changing subscriptions and changing a lot of things in the back end. So here, this is a new admin center. Now, we're very used to, from a SharePoint administrator, admin level, architect level, central admin. This is, I want to say this is not central admin. This is going to be an admin center that will encompass central admin, and we're going to screen the O365, what I think the O365 equivalent of a central admin would be. But here, and I say this is greater than the central admin, because if you are if you have Exchange and Skype and Yammer and all this other good stuff, these are your respective admin centers of where you would go. So in my mind, in some organizations, I think what's going to happen is that if you were a SharePoint administrator for on-prem or architect for the farm, you're going to be given access to this SharePoint admin center with the understanding that you're not the same person who manages the Exchange. You're not the same person who manages the PBX and the e-communications within your organization, and maybe Yammer will fall into your pocket. But again, if you're thinking about O365, then you got this Azure AD piece right here, right? This is where your ADFS sync. If you had an on-prem AD and you had to do ADFS here, Azure ADFS or Azure AD is how that syncing and what happened. So you're given access here if you want to do whatever, right? I'm not sure exactly what's all in there, but in my mind, we still have the scenario, or the issue that needs to be, not issue, but the feature that needs to be solved, where you have a user profile, you have profile properties. Most of those profile properties are loaded from attributes coming from AD. That mapping needs to happen somewhere. So that may be here, that may be where they configure if it's going to be a two-way sync, meaning that if the user updates their profile, it syncs back to AD. When AD, maybe the timer jobs are, if AD's updated, what time of day it push those out, yada, yada, yada. So that may be the AD piece, Azure AD piece right there. What else? Oh, the person that handles all the subscriptions and billings within the organization, there's a separate admin section for there. The compliance, the info security, the legal hose, and the e-discovery and all this other good stuff, that's going to be in the compliance center. So there's another set of admins there. So again, O365 is like the globe or the circle that encompasses all of that, and SharePoint is just one of those components. I think in my mind it's a big component, but it's just one of them. Now, from a tenant perspective, right? From a tenant perspective, we're going to go into like how site collections are set up, and there's no web application, so how you deal with that. Service applications are shared across the tenant. How are you going to deal with that? So we're going to touch on that real quick. But before we go into there, if you go into is it resources? If you go into settings, right? So we're in the admin center, and then you go into settings, and I have to remind myself where we are, because there's another settings section once we go into the SharePoint admin center. But if you go into admin center, you go to settings, you go to organizational profile. Here, this is where you set your release preference for the tenant. Now, you have three options here. You can do a standard release. That means that when Microsoft rolls out new features, you won't see it until it's fully baked, and then they start rolling it out for general availability. The rollout is something else. I mean, that's a different topic, but just because Microsoft is rolling it out doesn't mean that you will see it today, the day it was rolled out, the next day, or even that week. I mean, sometimes these rollouts take 2 to 3 weeks before you get to see it. And we are going to where you can where you should go to anticipate changes. Now, as far as first release, if you're using a single tenant, my recommendation is to have at least two tenants. You can have one tenant that's going to do first release. That's where you play, right? And that's what, especially when you start talking about administrator type stuff, you really cannot segment, those settings. There are certain settings that's going to affect everyone in the organization. So you better have a tenant where you can play around with, okay, I want to change the setting. What's the effect it's going to have? And then once you change that setting, you understand the effect, communicate that out to your organization, and then plan when you're going to roll that out to production. Typical application lifecycle stuff, right? So that would be my recommendation. Say, hey, have a non-prod tenant. I don't know if you have to do dev, QA, UAT, and all those different tenants. I think you're still going to, in my mind, I think you're carving up different site collections and then your prod tenant. So I would say a non-prod tenant to test out your settings and admin and global. This is going to affect the company as a whole deal, right? And then have your production tenant, which is set to standard release. Now, in your production tenant, you can also do first release for select users, and then specify which user IDs you want to put in as first release. And then even in prod, those users, when they log in, they will see the new stuff. But users who are not part of that, selected user, first release for select user, will see the classic stuff. Okay. So that's that. So that's how you go ahead and set your tenant up for first release. And just keep in mind, right, that when you do MSDN, most of the developers who have MSDN subscription, I don't think those are set up for first release by default. So if you have MSDN and you're still not seeing some of these new features as they're rolling out, or as Microsoft is announcing that they're being rolled out, and it's been like a week or two, and you suspect you should have seen them, double check your profile just to make sure that you're set up for first release. Now, the other thing I want to touch on, let's go into the SharePoint admin piece, and then we're going to wrap up. I'll just maybe I'll do a part 2 to this video. So here in the SharePoint admin piece, here it's going to list out all the site collections. As of now, there's no out-of-the-box way for an end user to be self-service to create a site collection. They can be self-service to create a new sub-site. Obviously, if they have access to the site collection, they can be self-service to create a new sub-site to a default site collection, which doesn't have to be the root site collection. I'm not sure if that's a popular term or not, but usually when you have many site collections like this listed, right, I call this one the root, which is the one that does not have any slashes or subdomain manipulation. I call that the root site collection. But either one of these, when you create them, you can specify storage quota. You can do server resource quota. The server resource quota, this was back in the day. It's back in the day now, right? Because Microsoft has already, announced that they're deprecating Sandbox. But when you can do Sandbox solutions, server resources where you can carve out, okay, for this site collection, I only want, and I don't know the unit of measure, right? It's like 1 to 300 or 1 to 900. So it's a resource count. And then you get a unit of CPU, a unit of memory, and again, whatever that unit means. But that's what was reserved for that Sandbox solution to run. But now, because they're deprecating that and there's not going to be any Sandbox options running on the cloud, which I think would probably speed up things, right, significantly, I think resources are going to have less of an impact, so I wouldn't too much be concerned with those. So you have, this is where your site collections are. For each and every site collection, you can come up here and click Properties. That's just a read-only view. You can sharing, for example, you can tell it if you do not want this site collection to share, or you will enable site collections to share with external users. I think by default, do not share is the default setting for any new site collection that's created. I'm gonna shoot another video where I go into a lot of detail into each one of these options, but as of right now, we're not going to go into that level of detail. But I just wanted to show you that this is where all your site collections live. There are no concept of web applications here in O365, so you can have up to, I want to say 500,000 site collections, and all 500,000 of those would be listed here, right, with some type of paging. Of course, you have a URL search and all this other good stuff. One of the big issues that you would have to tackle from a planning perspective is like, okay, we have all these site collections, they're flat, and if we're going to carve out, these are UAT, these are production, or these belong to this set of site collections belong to this business unit, business group, division. How are you going to tag those, right? And then what level of access are you going to give your end users? Will you give them site collection admin access to these site collections, or maybe you may have a SharePoint administrator create these site collections and give them only site owner access. So those types of planning and design is one of those key pieces that you would have to figure out, especially because there are no web applications that you can kind of group these and house under, start creating these groups of site collections that should perform or react in a certain way. I think that's one of those pieces that you would have to figure out. Okay, what else? Oh, last thing, and we're going to wrap up. This video actually turned out to be way longer than originally anticipated. Now, if you go under, I might have to click around to find it, but there is a message center. Let me just go home. It's on the home page. It's on the dashboard. So in the message center, right, so this guy here, if you click on the message center, this tells you all of the new features that are coming up. So here, as of August 31st, it says, here's a new capability. This is that O365 group and team site integration and modern site. So this was just released today. And then you go next. It just talks about external sharing, how there's a change in that feature, so on and so forth. So usually when these message centers pop up, it says, hey, here's a change. I think what they're informing, and I wonder if they're different if the tenant is set to standard or if it's the same message. But from my experience, and I know Microsoft is looking to tighten this up, because I think this is one area that a lot of the clients are really providing a lot of feedback on. That says, hey, Microsoft, we love it that you guys are very aggressive and creating these new features and bug fixing on the fly, and we're getting it. We never seen this rapid deployment or enhancement in SharePoint. But the problem is that we don't know when things are coming, right? So I think this message board only speaks to when they're available to, not only it speaks to, but if there's a new feature, it's meant for first release. But then I think there's a follow-up message that says, okay, now this is going to be rolled out to general availability. But I think the message center is where you want to definitely keep your finger on the pulse as far as what's coming. Set up your communication plan in order to make sure your business users are informed and ready to go. And so there's you minimize the surprises for the end user. Okay, I think that's it for now. Just again, I just want to give you guys a quick 10-second tour. O365, really just kind of supplement those videos that we were talking about before, as far as like the new development model that's coming, and how developers should be prepared and prepped for what's coming out. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.